organized. And so, Steve, you've got Freddie Kiger here today to keep you honest. And I might tell you right out of the gate, too, that Dick Bedour is in the audience now, and he will be listening to you. So, although you may not be able to BS him as much as you once might have, but you don't have to suck up to Dick anymore. He's just one of the rest of us now. So on that note, Steve Kirschner is a UNC Senior Associate Athletic Director for Communications. What a long title. Now in his 31st year. Steve actually comes here from Bristol, Connecticut. He started his career in that work where he got his degree at the University of Connecticut. In addition to all of his oversight duties, Steve specifically handles the media work for Tar Heel men's basketball and men's golf and all the stuff associated with those programs. We get to see him when he runs the press box for football, which is a far different animal this year. Maybe he can talk about the implications of the pandemic. I would say that one of his problems is that anybody who knows anything about sports writers and sportscasters know that we are all freeloaders and that we expect to be fed at the games free. And this year, because of the pandemic, there's no food in the press box. And I think Steve has done a wonderful job of handling the insurrection of the freeloaders who come in as sports writers. He's a wonderful diplomat in that regard. At any rate, the truth really is that Steve, as with a lot of us who are in the business, Steve has had the most fun job in the business because he handles the media work for men's basketball. He's been doing it since the 1995-96 season. And so if you can imagine that he has been the media person for all the head coaches, Dean Smith, Bill Guthridge, Matt Doherty, and now Roy. And he's helped tell the story of more All-America basketball players than we could name in an hour. And Steve Kirschner is a big deal, too, in his national profession. Those of us here might not recognize that. He is widely respected among his peers. The United States Basketball Writers gave its highest recognition to those in Steve's role when it presented him with its national Cathy Quinn Award for Superior Media Service all the way back to 2005, which makes him a senior leader in that field. That's the equivalent to the Sports Information Director Player of the Year. Now, if you want more of the inside story on Carolina, Steve has co-authored books about all three of the men's basketball championships. One of them is Led by Your Dreams, about the 2005 championship. There's one called One Fantastic Ride, about 2009. And then the last one, Redemption, about 2017. And I will tell you, they're all fun reads if you're a Tar Heel, and I would put in a plug. They're all still great Christmas gifts. Finally, folks, President-elect Biden may be calling on Steve for advice on how to get along with the adversary, maybe even the Republicans, because Steve has to be a masterful diplomat to have lured a Duke graduate to marry him, because his wife, Jean, is a 1994 Blue Devil grad, and that seems to be working out. They have two great kids now in high school. And of course, they both are athletes. So on that note, please give a Rotary welcome to Steve Kirschner. Steve, go to it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Heavener. I appreciate you guys asking me on. This is Dickie and Willie Scroggs and others have asked me for years to speak to the Rotary group, and I appreciate your persistence, and this worked out really well. When Jim talked to me about a week ago, 10 days ago, about joining the meeting, he talked to me about maybe speaking for about 15 minutes or so, and I went out for my afternoon, early evening walk, and I started kind of rehearsing what I was going to say, and 43 minutes later I stopped. So I'm not going to do that today. I understand. I could talk about my job and what I do, particularly at Carolina. I could talk about it for hours. Those of you who want to stick around, you're welcome to go well past 2, because I love what I do. I love where I do it. I don't really consider it a job for the most part. Like Jim said, I've been doing this for 31 years at UNC, 36 years when you include 4 years as a student at UConn and 1 year at Florida. And it's not really a job. Maybe 31 days out of all that time I would ever consider it to be a job. And those are usually, either coaches getting fired or the NCAA calling you, or God forbid, the worst thing ever happening is if a student athlete or a coach, were to get into an accident, and we've had tragedies like that, of course. Losing a game, I don't really consider to be a bad day unless it's to a rival or in a national championship setting or something like that. Especially when we're all living through COVID. Losses of games don't really have the same. You got to put things in perspective. They don't really have the same impact. I basically work in the storytelling arm of Carolina Athletics, and that's what I do is I tell stories, and we've done it through different ways over that time. When I first got into sports information in 1984, the first day that I stepped foot on the UConn campus, I walked into their office and a box showed up, and it was a fax machine. Because prior to that, newspaper writers would put their phone into a little machine or put a piece of paper into a machine called a telecopier, and it took 6 minutes to send a page of information. And that's how I started my career. I walked in and there was a fax machine, and that changed things. And then in the mid 90s, I got a call from a gentleman in our IT department called Joe Bray. And Joe said, Steve, there's this thing called the World Wide Web. I've put the football media guide on the World Wide Web. And certainly that has revolutionized what we do and the way we tell our stories. And obviously email and social media has probably changed it more than anything. But I love my job. We tell our stories in different ways now, not just through press releases and press conferences and interviews, but we're now actually our own media source. We're content creators now, whether that's graphics or video, tweets that used to be okay just to send out 70 characters, and then you had to add a picture, then you had to add a movie. Now it's got to be animated with bells and whistles and everything like that, or people won't look at it. So our job is really important to make sure that we deliver information to you all, many of whom are Carolina fans, the way you want to get it. And if there are 50 people on this call, 20 may like it through social media and 10 may like it through goheels.com. Some might want it through the News and Observer. So we have to be able to deliver our content how our consumer wants it. And that means very many different ways. My job, when Mr. Bedore was my boss and now Bubba, and the first day Roy got here, I told Roy, I said, my most valuable resource is your time. I will never abuse your time. If I ask you to do an interview, or if I think we should put out a statement, it's because I think that's what's best for Carolina or for your program or for you as the individual. And that's very important. I've told the athletic directors that I work for, as well as the basketball coaches that I work with, although in essence I work for, if you can't trust me to tell me the most confidential of information so that I can help you, then you should fire my butt. Because if you can't trust this person in this job, you've got to find somebody that you can. Because of that of all the things that we do, whether it's design and write media guides or game notes, press releases, set up press conferences, liaison with network TV, all the many things we do, the single most important thing that we do, in my opinion, is that we are counselors, we are advisors to athletic directors, coaches, student athletes, chancellors in some instances. We have to be their eyes and ears of what is going on in the public world. We have to be able to tell them either bad news or news that they may not want to hear, but that they need to hear. And sometimes that puts people in my position on the outside, because there are some leaders who don't want to hear bad news, or they don't want to hear what they have to hear. And so sometimes my colleagues get in tough spots with their bosses. And I've been very fortunate that the people that I've always worked for and worked with have always been open to that. And I think that's part of the reason that I do think I'm sort of biased, but I think Carolina has been successful because of the people that it's had in leadership positions that are willing and open to hear that kind of news, and understand that's my job. I always tell myself when the craziness is going on, that's when you've got to keep your cool. The person in my position, because I am an advisor, I am someone who helps people make decisions. Decisions I make are, put this picture in this story or use that headline. But the people I work for, coaches and athletic directors make those types of decisions. Um, the job that I have is great. Um, you know, I don't lie. I tell people, we're a public relations shop. Our job is not to tell the media everything we know, but our job is also to never lie. Because once we do, if we tell a lie, we can never get that integrity back. Once it comes out of the bottle, it's gone. And same thing I've said. I met with our freshman basketball players on Tuesday and met with them for about 30 minutes about doing interviews. And we normally bring somebody in from the outside to do some training, but with COVID and budgets, we decided, I said, I'll do it. And one of the things I talked about was I said, I'll never speak on your behalf unless you give me the authority. I write quotes all the time for our athletic department, for Bubba, for coaches, sometimes for student athletes. But it's always, okay, tell me what you want to get across. And then I put that together and then they approve it. And I've never put out a statement in 36 years of doing this that wasn't approved by that person. A lot of times now, particularly with the men's basketball players that I work with, they all have NBA aspirations, and every little injury, every little, if they didn't play a game here or something, everything affects that. So anytime we speak that might be speaking on their behalf, you've got to really, parents get more involved now because of the high stakes of things like that. And those are some of the things that have changed. I'm very fortunate. I'm 54 years old. I have never held a job a day in my life that wasn't in sports. I started at age 10 with a minor league baseball team in Connecticut, the Red Sox Eastern League team. That's 2 levels below Boston. I started with them at age 10. And I went to UConn as a student assistant in sports information. Then I came here as an intern, and I broke the cardinal rule of interns. Freddie's probably heard me say this. I broke the cardinal rule of doing an internship. I fell in love with a place that didn't have a full-time job waiting for me. I did not want to leave Chapel Hill at the end of that year. I was thinking about, waiting tables at Spanky's and helping out in the stats crew, and I ended up getting a job at Florida. And the entire time that I was in Gainesville, I tried to get back here, and thankfully that year they did. They brought me back. The job that I have is people say, why do you do it? Game day is the best part. I love being part of game day. It's a 24/7, 365 job. There's no such thing as a news cycle anymore. Jim would know, back in the day, if something broke at 10 o'clock at night, public relations office, you could get away with, well, I'll get back to you tomorrow. Well, there's no such thing. It's not just the 6 and 11 o'clock news and the morning paper and, the morning radio news wrap up. News breaks when it breaks. I've taken calls on Thanksgiving Day at my in-laws because a walk-on men's basketball player got arrested with a marijuana possession. I've worked on more Christmases, going to bowl games and things. A couple years ago, when we were in the midst of the NCAA case, I took my family, my children and wife. We went to Hershey Park in Pennsylvania, and Chancellor Thorpe called, and I had to jump on a phone call with Chancellor Thorpe. I can't remember if it was Dickie or Bubba, quite frankly, and the legal counsel's office. And the only place I could take the phone call is I had to crawl under an ambulance at the water park at Hershey Park because I couldn't leave my face. It was one of those, hey, we're going to get on a call in 5 minutes kind of things. And I'm at a water park in Hershey Park, Pennsylvania. And the only place I could find quiet enough was to lay down on the ground underneath an ambulance. Thank God there was no call for that ambulance because I did the 30-minute call from there. So it's just the kind of job that you're always on. But it's a great job. Technology has certainly changed it, but I'm a storyteller. I've spent a lot of COVID updating the basketball record book. I'm kind of a nerd at heart, but I think we've added 26 new sections to that record book. And part of the reason I do it was not just to kill time during COVID when I was home, but I take very seriously, when I came here 32 years ago, I could go into the file cabinet in Rick Brewer's office, and there were pictures of Charlie Justice from 38 to 40 years prior to that. And I could find clips on Charlie and Art Weiner and players from the late 40s and 50s. And I take very seriously that even though technology has changed and everything's digital and that I hope 50 years from now, people can go in and find out the information about Tyler Hansbrough and Roy Williams, etc. So, adding that historical information and trying to help people tell the story of Carolina athletics is what I do. It's what I love to do, and that's probably the shortest opening statement I've ever given. So, I hope you have lots of questions.
Hello, Gavin.
There we go.
Hey.
Yeah, so I have not gotten a chat yet, so please raise your hand or chat me if you have a question.
Freddie or I will start. What did you do when you were 10 years old?
I was the bat boy for the Bristol Red Sox. And I did that for 6 years. And then I became the clubhouse equipment manager for the New Britain Red Sox when the franchise moved to the next town. And I did everything from washing the uniforms to cleaning, prepping the field. I was the groundskeeper after the city left. And I did wash the uniforms, all the underclothes, clean the locker room, put food out for the players, did the laundry. I'd show up at 9 a.m. and leave at about 1 a.m. And I did that for 6 years, right through college. And when I got to UConn, I was going to be a manager for the baseball team. And the head coach on my first day as a student, my head coach said, Andy Baylock said, "Why do you want to be a manager for the college team? That's what you do from April to September." He goes, "Why don't you go over to this thing called sports information?" And I had no idea I'd never heard of that before. And I walked in and I told you the fax machine box was there. And they said, "Well, you love baseball, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, we've never had a baseball media guide, really. Why don't you make one?" And I was like, "I'm at home. This is great." And I've been doing it since September of 1984. I've been doing this job.
I do have a question.
Freddie, go ahead.
Hey, Steve. Steve is my table mate for many, many, many years, and we have many stories to share. I first will let everyone know how proud I am to call you friend and how much I respect what you do for the
Likewise.
university and for journalism. And perhaps that'll lead in. Not too long ago, with the emphasis on trying to cut positions within athletic departments across the nation, and particularly at schools and universities, you put out an email or a tweet that kind of explained what you do. Would you be able to, in a way, give people an idea the incredible responsibility that you take on and that you do so well?
Well, I appreciate that. We in this business, it's changed because of the technology and the graphics and the video and things like that. But at heart, we still have to do the basics of the job, and that's, whether it's maintaining the statistics or the photo archives or writing press releases, game notes that help the broadcasters, particularly not just football and basketball, but for all of our sports that are on now either streamed or on the ACC network. You got announcers that are dropping in from anywhere, and probably now with COVID, they're not even coming to your campus. They're calling a volleyball match from Boston. So information that the people in our communications office puts together to help them prepare to do a broadcast, and running the press boxes, interacting with the media, sitting down with a Jay Billis or Dan Schulman type on a shoot around before the game to help them. Okay, well, why is so and so not playing so much, or who's playing well, or what's the status of the injury? Kind of giving them some background information, before Roy comes over or before they talk to the players. I did. I was worried that in this business, because of COVID, I mean, the budget realities are scary. And I had seen numerous places, both in professional athletics and college athletics, that the communications field, the sports information directors, the public relations people, again, both college and pro, were getting laid off. Positions were cut, furloughed, things like that. I totally understand furloughs, and Bubba's been fantastic about drawing the line of not reducing full-time staff. We're doing everything we can not to have to get to that step. and I applaud that 100%. But I had seen, other schools like Memphis had cut most of their PR staff right in the middle of the football season in September. And there was a tweet by somebody that said, "What exactly do SIDs do?" And so I said, "Well, if you want to know, here's what it is." And I put out an 8-part thread tweet that I had a list of all the things that we do, and it certainly left out some, but it was 8 pages long. And I was blown away by the response to that, not only by my colleagues in sports information, but I did reach out to people like Vital and Jay Billis and Dan Schulman and others to say, would you mind retweeting this? Because I know you guys respect what we do. And I was absolutely overwhelmed with the response, both really from the national media, my colleagues. I've never had a tweet that had that many people. And it was cool because it did, we're in a changing world. And we, the communications people, we have to do more than we used to do. We cannot just write press releases. We have to be able to do graphics and put video into certain things. There's just an expectation now that you have to be able to tell your story in a much more advanced way. Again, like I said earlier, how you consume it. One audience may strictly, hey, that's fantastic. You put out a press release, the News and Observer puts it in the paper, great. They got your website, fantastic. They'll read it. But there are others that if it's not on social media, if it doesn't have video to it, they're not even going to look at it. So you can be stubborn and old school and say, hey, this is the way I grew up. This is the way I'm going to do it. And that's all I'm going to do. Well, you're going to get run over. And I don't want to be, I want to do this job for a long, long time. I'm 54. I have no intention of retiring anytime soon. I love what I do. And you've got to be able to keep up with it. And that was sort of the message of the thread was, we do a lot of stuff, and I hope people recognize that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Freddie. Freddie has the worst seat in college basketball. He has to sit next to me at every home game. Every time, if you watch a Carolina basketball game, I sit right next to the bench, and Freddie sits next to me. And if you ever see me go like that, I am not like protecting because of COVID. I am probably barking about some officiating call or something else, and Freddie's got to hear it, but because he's the only one that can hear me talking through my hand like that.
Awesome. David Badur has a question. David, are you on the call?
I am on the call. Hold on. Hey, guys.
Hi, David.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, how are you, Steve?
Great.
I just wondered if you'd give us a few thoughts about the basketball season that's getting ready to start. I guess both in terms of interesting things that are going on for COVID reasons, and then also just more the, X's and O's. How do we look? How do the freshmen look? Yeah.
Sure. I'll do the second part first, if you don't mind. We've got more depth, both front court and back court. We have the ability to go big or small. Last year, very similar to 2010, when Roy's first team that didn't go to the NCAA tournament, that so much of that was due to injuries. It sounds like an excuse, but if that team last year is healthy, that's not a 14-19 team. It might not be a regional team or a Final Four team, but it's not a 14-19 team. We just didn't have the depth once guys started dropping, and you lose your most talented player in Cole, and then you lose Brandon Robinson repeatedly 3-4 different times. This year, I'm hoping, and we're going to have to be prepared for that, because if a guy has to sit out because of COVID or another injury, I'm hoping that we've got a few more bodies that can go and stay at the same level we want to be at. The freshman guards, Caleb Love, you're going to love, RJ Davis, they're both really exciting players. We were the worst shooting Carolina basketball team in school history last year by any objective or subjective measure. We just couldn't make shots. I don't think we took a lot of bad shots, but we just didn't make the ones we took. We had like 5 guys that were among the worst three-point shooting percentage in single season school history. 1 is tough enough, but when you have 5, that's probably not a good sign. But Garrison, I think, has added a little bit of ability to score facing the basket. I left practice last night at the very end, and he was shooting 3-pointers from the top of the key. And last year when he took a three, it was usually desperation at the end of the shot clock, and he was making threes. It's just a much more natural shot for him. And if he wants to play in the NBA, that's a shot that he has to make. It's just not enough anymore in the NBA to be a big and be able to score off the block. You've got to be able to extend your game. And we've got bigs that can do both. So it's hard because we have no preseason game, no exhibition game, and our non-conference schedule, if it comes off, is really difficult. Going to Iowa, they're going to be they have 5 returning starters from an NCAA tournament quality team with the guy who won last year's National Player of the Year. We play Ohio State in Cleveland. Now there probably won't be fans, but it's still in Cleveland. The teams that we play in Maui/Asheville, that'll be a little bit different experience. It's a good field there as well. Sometimes we get Chaminade in the opening round. This year we don't. We get Vegas, and then we get either Alabama or Stanford. So our non-conference schedule is difficult. Kind of tying that back into what you were talking about COVID, I just don't know how many games we're going to play. We released a 27-game schedule the other day. That's 4 games less than we normally play. I don't know how many of those 27 we're going. I hope we get 23, 5, 7. That'd be fantastic. But you just don't know, because the hardest piece of this, and football's finding it out right now. There are 4 SEC, 3 Big Ten games that are canceled this week, and that number seems to be growing. There's 20 college basketball teams, men's college basketball teams, whose practice activities have been suspended because of COVID. It's the contract chasing part that's really difficult, particularly with basketball. You get a small number team, anywhere from 14 to 17. We have 17 players this year, 13 scholarship and 4 walk-ons. And you start contacting, having to stop and do 2 weeks of contact. It's really hard. The difference, and people don't want to talk about this, but the difference between college football and college basketball is you had to end the college football season far enough back into 2021 to be able to have the 2021 season. College basketball doesn't have that problem. I mean, it's an issue. It's not 100% perfect, but in my opinion, you could play the college basketball season in July. I mean, if we get to the point where we've got to shut down again, we could play in April, May, June, July. I personally, I'm not making that decision for college basketball or even for UNC, but I don't see why we couldn't do that. These kids could play until August 1st and then turn around and still go into the NBA draft and still both be ready for NBA camps in the fall or college basketball season next year. But I think it's really important from a financial standpoint, with the revenue that we get from college, from television, as well as the NCAA tournament. Right now we're looking at a $25 to $30 million deficit at UNC. And that's, think about what Michigan, with 100,000 seat football stadium, schools like that. Think it's unprecedented, obviously. And it's really scary when you think about it. It's something that you don't want to look at and go, oh my God, doom and gloom. But the reality is, we still have to pay a lot of bills to keep the athletic department running, as does the university and the financial challenges that it faces. But those are real challenges. And so I think the ability to play a Final Four and the revenue that it generates from TV it can't be ignored. People don't want to talk about the financial impacts of things. Well, there are a lot of people who work in college athletics, and scholarships are funded through college athletics, who it is very serious, and it's a real thing.
Excellent question, David. Alan Young has a question.
Hey, Steve, thanks for being here. So
Glad to be here. Excuse me.
We're near the same age, and we've seen, since 70s and 80s, we've seen a lot of continuity, but we've seen change. Do you speculate or have any speculation what college athletics looks like a decade from now, 2 decades from now?
great question, because we talk about it here in the athletic department all the time and no one knows. There's so much legal maneuvering that's gone on around college athletics in probably the last 6 to 8 years or so that is nowhere settled yet. And a lot of that is, the name, image, and likeness idea. And the concern there is that the concern is not to rein in student athletes' rights. It's how to do it in a way where football and men's basketball players in particular are compensated for their name, image, and likeness, which I think is a fairness issue that I certainly believe, and do it in a way that it doesn't gut your, and I don't mean just at UNC, but gut your ability to have a women's tennis team and a men's track and field program. Because if you have a corporate sponsor who is currently spending X with the athletic department, and instead of spending X with the athletic department, they decide, well, we're going to spend 90% of that just promoting your point guard or the quarterback on the football team. Well, that 90% that now goes to the quarterback, that used to go into a pot to make sure we could fund a women's tennis program. I pick women's tennis and any Olympic sport program. So that's the concern. But you also have other court cases out there that go beyond name, image, and likeness. And if you asked any athletic director, if you asked the smartest athletic director in the country, and Bubba's in that group, they can't tell you. They cannot tell you. They can tell you what they think might happen if we go down this path, but I don't think anybody has a crystal ball that is secure enough in knowing what college athletics looks like 10 years from now. It's a hell of a non-answer, isn't it?
Thank you for that non-answer.
Any other questions?
Well, let me jump in with one more then. Steve, good stories. There's no good story without some tension. And you've just talked about the tension in the future. Also, because we are part of the University of North Carolina, we're part of a higher education system. There is a kind of a constant tension between all the necessities of big time athletics and then all of the realities of the academic side of the university. And when that comes along, how do you and the administration wind up coordinating responses to issues that become public?
Well, part of that is having people in positions of authority that understand that the academic mission of the university comes first. And that's a great bumper sticker or slogan or something that, maybe can assuage somebody who's not a big fan of college athletics. But when you have John Swafford, Dickie, and Bubba run your athletic department for the last 40 years, and when you have people like Coach Smith and Coach Williams and Mac running the highest profile sports, it's easier because they understand why we're here. It was interesting back during the academic case. We would be, I told you part of it is, TV people would come to shoot around, and I'd sit there and talk to Roy's running shoot around, and I'm over there talking with the Jay Billises of the world about our team. And invariably, Jay or Dan Schulman or whatever go, "Hey, where's so-and-so? I don't see so-and-so. Are they not playing tonight? Are they hurt?" And I'm like, "No, they're in a lab." And they're like, "Well, what are you talking about?" I go, "Well, we're in a lab." They go, "Well, you're playing Georgia Tech in 5 hours," because our shoot-arounds are usually 5 hours before. "You're playing Georgia Tech in 5 hours. Where's your starting two guard?" I go, "Well, he's in a chem lab," because that's what Coach Williams believes comes first. And, we show up at, we get back to the Smith Center at 4:30 in the morning. If we play a 9 o'clock game in Tallahassee, now that's beyond our control of whether we should be playing a 9 o'clock basketball game in Tallahassee on a Wednesday night. But when that happens and we get back to the Smith Center at 4:30, I get off the bus, and before I get off the bus, I hear Roy Williams stand up and go, "You better be in that 8 o'clock class." Okay. Because we'll be checking to make sure that you're in net 80. Well, that's in 3.5 hours. And so I think part of it is having the people in place. And that's what's great about Mac and Roy, particularly. They don't want to run. They're not in charge of their teams. They run programs, and it sounds so. There is a difference, and both of them are people who run their program to be part of the community, part of the school, and understand. I mean, they're paid very well, and we bring in a lot of revenue from those programs, but they get that they are not the priority here, and as much as people think they do, they don't. And that's just that we're very fortunate that and not just those two. I mean, the other head coaches that we have as well that aren't as high profile or the revenue speaking, but we're fortunate that the people who are running our program think like that.
Wow, 2:00. Woo.
Perfect. Well, Steve, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. We are grateful. That was, as always, we have such great programs, and you kind of elevated that to another level today. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We wish everybody a healthy and a safe weekend. And until next week, be well.